I want to create something that is not made of wattle and daub, and ideally modular. I know. What if I create some awesome looking modular castle ruins? Hey folks, my name is Leif and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel called DEVSANDDICE. Today's project is a simple one. I wanted to make some modular castle ruins. My presence online has been spotty at best as of late, and the reason for that is that I've had some ulnar nerve problems for the past 4 months or so. I finally had a surgery a couple of days ago. The prognosis is good and I should be back at 100%, if not better, in about a month or 2. Let's get cracking. So I've had some of these cardstock papers for some while. I ordered them and I wasn't really sure what to use them for because they were quite flimsy and thin. But I wanted to give it a shot, and I was thinking specifically for this build to use them as my substructure for my walls. Now here you can see I decided to go for 2 stories, and each story is 2 inches high. So I glued the paper using some hot glue to a thin base that I had cut out on the laser cutter, and I had to use quite a lot of hot glue and there was some spill. But thankfully in the end, once I got it all there, it actually worked pretty nice. So I started hot gluing on some bricks. And I'm actually using a new XPS that I found, which I really like, and it has a nice definition. Ask me in the comments if you want to know more about it. And like a good smash burger, I had to use a spatula to really get that off there, because of course the bottom layer hot glue tends to run over and get stuck everywhere where you don't want it to. Which was why I started with some traditional white hobby glue and started bricking in the walls for this tower. And quite quickly, I do enjoy using these sort of manual efforts. I mean, yes, I realize the irony that I've screwed up my elbow nerves and I like to do this, but I think it just looks so much better with individually placed bricks. Now I wanted to have smaller towers. I'm not exactly sure what these would be in reality, but I wanted to have sort of small towers that could connect in a modular way to this large tower. And I decided to make these the same height, which would be 4 inches, i.e. 2 stories. And here is where a bit where I compromise with my own values, but I decided that these towers will not have an entrance, which was fine. So I started bricking a lot of these towers while listening to some R.E. Salvatore D&D books. Actually, I'm trying to get into the Forgotten Realms and really understand the world because I want to DM soon. Anyways, I am cutting out these Lego windows on this paper just so that I can glue them in. And one thing that I really didn't count on when it came to this paper is, again, it is quite finicky. So when I started gluing it on the cylinders that I created, I had to really pay attention that it came on straight, because apparently some flimsy paper has a lot of give and it can make it glue on quite crooked. And when it came to gluing the window, well, again, it's quite messy, but I don't mind that because I know I'm going to texture the window down the line. Once I have the paper glued in, it's just a question of continuing bricking, and eventually I'll reach to the height where the paper is. And this actually worked quite nice, I have to say, so I could easily brick all the way up to the roof line, or even higher if I wanted to. So this technique worked wonders. And Sir Scalelog seems to like it. Now, one of the benefits of having a laser cutter nowadays is that I can make my own jigs for the Proxxon hot wire foam cutter. I knew I wanted to have some sort of bridges in between these two towers, and my thinking was that I wanted to have an arched bridge. So I made a simple little jig that basically cuts out this shape. And it actually worked pretty nice. So once I have that cut out, I literally just cut out some pillars that would have the equivalent measurements and hot glued them in with a toothpick for some stability. Now, when it comes to stability, these bridges, well, I needed to weigh them down. So I just took a nut and hot glued it into the bottom of each of the legs, which gave it some stability. In terms of the dimensions for these pillars or these bridges, I went for something that is dividable by my brick size. And again, my brick size is 5 × 5 × 10 millimeters. So in this case, each pillar, the core of it was 2 centimeters. Now the final touches is to custom cut some small bricks here and there where we have some gaps, and then I cut the top off flush, and then I added some new XPS foam bricks, and these are actually 1 centimeter × 5 millimeters. But as you can see there, I had to steal some bricks to make it work. And I did some that were even destroyed, and it turned out pretty nice to have 4 sets of bridges. Now, when it came to the large tower, I knew I wanted to have several floors, so I started cutting out the shapes to have the beams run across it. And once I had that in place, it was a simple thing to use some coffee stir sticks and some white glue to get the flooring installed. Now, in general, I have to say white glue is my preferred method anytime I glue anything that is made of wood or paper or such, because it seeps in much better. But I needed to weigh these down, so I just used my old can of coffee stir sticks to weigh it down. Once it had set, I started gluing in the top layer of the bricks, and then I basically repeated the process, but again I made the top floor a little bit more shallow. This is so that it's easier for me to put ladders that lead up to the floor above, and also it just makes it easier for players to reach in with their hands. Now, these beams I glued in, and once I had them glued in with some hot glue, I added some bricks on top of them so it would look like they were seamlessly installed into the wall. Once that was done, I went for white glue and then adding some planking using coffee stir sticks again on top. Quite simple, but very effective method. And here you can see what I referred to beforehand quite clearly, that there is quite a lot of space left for me to put a ladder on the first floor leading up to the second floor. Here I think I was starting to run out of patience and or time, so I decided to finish off the details with some hot glue. Now, one thing I didn't like about this was that there wasn't any entrances from any other side except where it was ruined. Well, warbands of Mordheim, they're ingenious and they don't mind doing a little bit of damage, so I decided to cut out part of a wall here so that I could have a nice entrance coming in from both sides. This was a bit tricky, and my knife didn't always want to cooperate with me, but eventually I got it done. One thing though is that I saved the pieces of cut wall because I thought that might be a nice little detail to show in the rubble inside of this building. So this is what I'm hot gluing in right now. You can see those two pieces, and I just add a whole bunch of hot glue and then add them on the inside of the building, like so. Once that had set, I basically covered the entire bottom with a thin layer of white glue, and then I'm going to come in with some brown battleground from Army Painter. And I'm just doing this to get some basic textures on the actual ground. And what I'm going to do as well is, of course, to add on top of this some broken planking, some broken bricks and so on, just to get it to feel more rubbly and random. Another jig I created for this project was this little thing. I'm not sure exactly what these are called, but these were going to be my holders for the railing on top of the bridges. And here you can see that I'm texturing these pieces using a ball of aluminum foil. And I missed to film this, but I glued these on using some hot glue. Once they're on, I just try to dig out a square hole where I can attach the 1-inch tall beams. And it will look something like that in the end. I wanted to try something new. I usually put the actual grids in afterwards and prime them separately, but I wanted to put them in now because, again, I was running out of time. One of the big problems with these smaller towers was the flooring. I knew how to do it, but how the heck can I fit my hand in there? Well, I used post-its that I cut out to shape, and then once I had glued the planking to the post-it, I could cut it around with the scissors, and then I could slot it right into the tower. And it looked pretty good, I have to say. Another problem I discovered was that these bridges were quite finicky and had a tendency to fall over. So I stole this idea from Eric's Hobby Workshop. I rummaged through my bits bin and looked for any boxes or printed barrels or anything that could be set at the corners of the build. In order to have these really properly be stuck there, I decided to pin them and then jam the entire pin inside the pillars. And this made them a heck of a lot more stable. So thanks for that, Eric. I'm going to use some large grain sand, and here you can use whatever sort of acrylic paste you have, in all honesty. I think I even used some gravel and glue, and it worked quite nice. Once that is dried, it's time to prime, and as always, I tend to want to prime using my airbrush simply because I don't want to take the chance to melt the foam with aerosol. Once the primer has done its job, I come in with some high flow acrylic white paint from Golden Acrylics, and this I spray at a downwards angle to give an illusion of light. This is then covered with some burnt umber ink, which is quite transparent, so you might need to use quite a lot of it. And then for most things bricks, I come in and I stipple in some dark gray. Very important because I want to retain some of that brown undertone. Here I'm coming in with some light gray, and this is much more of a dry brush coming from up to down. Here's a step that I really enjoy, and this is using some spackle or filler, which I thin out a little bit and then I just slaver it on. And then once I have a certain section slathered on, I take a paper towel and dry it off. Looks quite nice, I think, because this also helps you to give that little worn look to your bricks. While we're looking at me doing this over and over, I want to take this opportunity to thank my patrons for their continued support. A special shout out goes to my champion and legend level patrons. So thank you Agresomnia, Andreas Winberg, Arjen Angenen, Fredrik Kiersgaard Lund, Gunnar Byström, Henrik Mannestråle, Jason Chastain, Madners, Magnus Solberg, Teddy, Urban, Anton Hand, Battlecorgi the 7th, Kiwi the Goblin, Niklas Swedenlind, Oliver Granlund, The Elder Kine, and What I Gotta Roll. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. So the next step is really to just color in the walls of these small towers, and here I'm using my usual light brown and then I think it's called flesh tone beige. Now I also wanted to give all of the items that I glued in a base color, so I did that. While that was drying, I used some corrosion texture on the windows, and then I came back on the items and just gave them a little bit of a dry brush of a redder color, and then some brighter brown for details with some metallic. Ryza Rust and some lead belcher was used on the windows. I soaked some of my posters down and then glued them quickly onto all of the logical places, essentially. Now this needs to dry for a while, but once it has dried, I come in with a special sauce, which for me is strong tone through the airbrush to give it a bunch of grime and character. Now one of the final steps is to use some white ink to do some graffiti, some Skaven symbols, warnings and such. And then some blood splatter here and there. Now I'm really happy with the result of these. It's not the most extravagant of builds, but I do like the modularity of these. I can connect them and create quite interesting gameplay spaces, which is what I was going for. What do you think about the build? Please feel free to tell me in the comments down below. If you want to see more of my videos, then YouTube suggests that you should be looking at these. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.